In keeping with the theme that July is G.I. Joe inspired episodes, this episode are about some forgotten 80s toys that were directly inspired by G.I. Joe itself. So, stick around! Hello fellow dorks and dorkettes, and welcome to Plastic Ghosts. My name is Rob, and this is the show where we talk about those forgotten toys that haunt our memories. In this episode, we are circling back to a topic that we discussed a little bit earlier in the year, and that is military toys. Now, I can say with complete confidence that these 80s military toys are directly inspired by G.I. Joe. I think very few people realized the impact that G.I. Joe would have on the toy market when Hasbro re-released the line in 1982. Now, of course, there were military-inspired toys that were released in 1980, 1981, and 1982 itself. But all the ones released after 82, yeah, you can thank G.I. Joe for them. And I just want to say before we get started that I despise the terms rip-off, bootleg, or generic. Because at the end of the day, these are all toys that someone somewhere has a very fond recollection of, and they enjoyed playing with them so very much. So I don't want to diminish those people's memories, and I don't want to diminish the whole fact that a toy is made to be played with. That even though its origins are a little unscrupulous, it's still a toy, and people played with it, enjoyed it, and have fond memories of it. So, with all that being said, let's get to number 1 on the list. Recently, in an episode of Plastic Ghosts, I talked about forgotten comic book toys. In that episode, I talked about Remco releasing Sergeant Rock action figures based on the DC comic. While discussing that forgotten comic book toy, I mentioned that Remco kind of took the ball and ran with it as far as using the Sergeant Rock universe. See, I think they wanted to pay the bare minimum for using the license of Sergeant Rock. But Remco took it upon themselves to create an entire Sergeant Rock universe, while only using Sergeant Rock himself as the anchoring point. So this toy line is kind of a spin-off of the Sergeant Rock toys, and they are called Sarges Team. From what I can remember, the Sarges Team figures were pretty darn awesome. They were made in a 5 1/4 scale, and they used the same molding process that Remco had used for the Warlord toys, Pirates of the Galaxies, and Warrior Beasts. Now, it's kind of lost in the gobbledygook of what came first in this situation, but this molding style is very reminiscent of Masters of the Universe. Now, Sarge's Team was released in 1982, so again, kind of gobbledygook to what came first, G.I. Joe or Sarge's Team. In the past, I've talked about that my overactive imagination has kind of made a backstory to things like this, where corporate spies within the toy world would pull a Mission Impossible on Hasbro to see what they were cooking up and to see how they could get there first. Anyway, my imagination aside, these very simplistic figures were pretty cool. Now, my only exposure to the Sarges Team was when my neighbor bought one, and I don't have any recollection of which figure or how we played with it. I can only remember that it was really cool to have a G.I. Joe inspired character in a He-Man body. Now, Sarge's Team was made up by 4 members, and they are Sarge, Gunner, Ranger, and Shoots. And Shoots is spelled like parachutes, not shoots. You know what I mean? Anyway, when we talked about these Sergeant Rock action figures in that forgotten comic book episode was how Remco took a lot of liberties in creating villains for the Sergeant Rock side of the line. Now, these liberties that Remco took were probably for the best, because in the original Sergeant Rock comic book, his villains were, you know, the bad guys during World War II. And you don't really want to make action figures of those. So, they created a villain faction known as Snake. Yeah, see, how did this happen? Corporate espionage, I tell ya! Anyway, the Snake side of the Sarges team, the bad guys, had 4 characters as well. And their names were Snake, Buzzard, Wolf, and Shark. Now, the good guys and the bad guys both pretty much had the same molds, just different colors. The Sarges team featured olive drab, a la like the first incarnation of the G.I. Joe figures. The bad guys, same outfits, just in black. When you look at them side by side, Sarges team and Snake, the bad guys, had a lot of similarities. I mean, one of Sarges team wore a beret, one of the bad guys wore a beret, although he had an eye patch, which I think kind of gives extra points to him. But these just look like simplistic, fun, He-Man sized G.I. Joe action figures. And these are ones that I would love to have in my collection today. And I'm really excited for when we go on our Plastic Ghosts hunt to see where they lie in the whole pricing structure. As usual, I'm sure people see 80s stamped on their butts and increase the price tenfold. But you never know, we could get lucky. Now, our next toy was released by Ecomus in 1986, and it is XForce. No, not those guys. These guys. Now, XForce was part of Ecomus's X-Changers line. A line of action figures that they put out that you were able to swap the parts of. Arms, legs, heads would all pop off the body and you could switch them up any way that you wanted. This extended to all the other Exchanger lines that Ecomus released, like the sci-fi ones, the monster ones, and other things like that. Now, a toy line like this, released in '86, I think has healthy inspirations in both G.I. Joe and the Rambo film franchise. Now, some of the standout features of the X-Force toy line, apart from them being part of the exchangeable series of toys from Ecomus, are their size. They're, 4 to 5 inches, which kind of fit the Masters of the Universe size of toys. They had cloth and soft good uniforms that you could take on or off. And, I hate to say this, their names. Their names are, well, yeah, let me just read them to you. And let me say, these were toys made in a different time, and yeah, let me grab my phone so I don't mess any of these up. Okay, the leader of the team is Colonel Strong. Next is Dak Lowe, which I would assume is the martial artist of the team. It's the 80s. You had to have at least a ninja or a martial artist in any toy line. Next, Igor, with 2 R's. Now to one of my personal favorites, and that is Lieutenant Stern Strongbow, who is heavily inspired by Rambo, as you can guess, because he has a bow and arrow. Next, Sergeant Scar, S-K-A-R-R, mind you. And then, the last member of the team, of course in alphabetical order, is Zulu Jones. I'm not going to comment on where the name came from, just trust me here. Now, from what I can find in my research, there were only 6 figures released and 1 vehicle. It's surprising that there wasn't a villain organization to go alongside of XForce, but I guess since it's part of the Exchanger line, you could use any one of the other lines in that to be the villains. Like I said, aliens, monsters, all that awesome stuff. So maybe that was where the villains were supposed to come from. But either way, X-Force is kind of neat. I'll give it points for the cloth goods and, the whole exchangeable toy line is kind of neat. I mean, it gives longevity to basic action figures by allowing you to create other characters in other situations and just to have fun with it. Now, the next toy that we will be talking about was released in 1980, so it predates the wave that was created by G.I. Joe. This toy was released by Woolworth, so it was one that was only sold in their stores. Back in the 80s, my family were avid Woolworth shoppers. I mean, Woolworth was a great, reasonably priced department store, albeit on a very small scale. Now, besides the toy aisles, which I loved the pet aisle because in my area, it was one of the only places that sold live pets. I mean, fish, hamsters, and I believe they even had a couple parakeets. One of the things that also intrigued me about Woolworth was its diner in the front. I always thought that was so awesome, and unfortunately, I was never able to get a meal there. Oh, and I also remembered their candy section was awesome. They had awesome trading cards, awesome, candies like those Funny Bones. I mean, it was, bar none, one of the best in the area. Anyway, I'm only adding this stuff because this toy line, there's not a lot to say. See, this toy line released by Woolworth was titled Action Heroes. And there was only one figure in the entire toy line. See, it is very much reminiscent of the Kenner Star Wars molding process. Its arms, its head, and its legs moved, and that was it. There was no special swivel grip, kung fu grip, whatever you want to call it. It was just your bare basic, low articulation action figure. What did make it a notch above the rest was it came with a parachute. So you could chuck your action hero into the sky and watch him drift slowly down on a cushion of cheap plastic parachute goodness. Now this character, his name was Hero Number 1. So I don't know if there were plans to ever release any more heroes under that banner, but all we got was Hero 1, which sounds like a lot of other properties during the 80s, but we won't get into that right now. Now, I don't remember seeing this character. I don't remember ever seeing anyone with this toy, but I mean, for nostalgia's sake, he's pretty cool. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that our hunt for this plastic ghost is going to yield a lot of funky stuff that probably isn't this toy. So I'm kind of curious to see what kind of hits we get. I mean, especially when you add the word Woolworth to it. But that's all we have to say about it. I mean, it's a simple army man done in the style of, like I said, Kenner's Star Wars figures, and he had an awesome parachute. So, yeah, not much to say about him. Now, the next toy is one that has an unknown release date sometime during the 80s. That's the only thing I can find about it, that it was released in the 80s and no one knows exactly when or where. But it is the Lost Warriors, yes, I said that right, Warriors by Sun Gold. Now, I don't know if this was an intentional misspelling or something that slipped between the cracks during the quality control portion of the packaging, but yes, it's the last warriors, like it's a bunch of people that are just sitting around worried about stuff. Anyway, there were 6 characters in total, and they really came with a lot of accessories. Now, these again are a larger scale figure, and yeah, the one standout feature of them is a large removable helmet, a bunch of awesome hardware and weaponry, and a backpack belt combo that would go around the character. Taking a look at the accessories that they came with, I can only assume that these came after Rambo 2, because they come with bows, and I think with the popularity of the Rambo movie, it kind of went hand in hand that military characters would happen to be carrying bow and arrows around with them. Now, Sun Gold was an infamous, reasonably priced toy company that took heavy inspirations from a lot of different popular 80s toy lines. So, with that being said, this is kind of one of those, what actually inspired this toy? Was it Rambo? Was it G.I. Joe? Was it Masters of the Universe? Or was it take all 3 of these things, throw them into a bubbling cauldron, and see what we come up with? Anyway, they look fine enough. I mean, this was a type of toy that I probably would have had back in the day if I came across it, and honestly, I never did. Like I said, they were reasonably priced, which was my parents' favorite type of toy. But one thing I do want to point out real quick is their names. Anyway, let me read off these names to you, and again, I'm using my phone because I don't want to mess any of these perfect names up. We have who I assume is the leader of the team, Captain Matador. We have Dr. Thor, Lieutenant Cameron, who looks more at home in a fantasy setting than in a military setting, Sergeant Peppard. So, is he inspired by George Peppard or Dr. Pepper? Yeah. I don't know. Next is Skarvarsky, who I guess is a Russian operative. And the last member is Talos, who again looks like he would fit perfectly in a fantasy setting with his, half of a singlet kind of strongman aesthetic. I mean, mustache and everything. But anyway, I give props to toys like this because they did kind of bridge over multiple toy lines that they were emulating. And yeah, it came with a lot of great accessories that you could probably use for many of your other action figures. So serious props to that. And they just didn't come with 1 or 2. They came with a buttload of accessories. Now, again, I don't know if these were meant to be called The Last Warriors, or they really did settle for the title of Last Warriors. I mean, these guys look pretty tough, and they got a lot of weaponry, so I don't think they have a lot to worry about, but who knows? Now, our last toy is one that I can say without a shadow of a doubt is not inspired by G.I. Joe, but it is using the popularity of the military during the 80s, albeit from different action movies, toy lines, or whatever. The toy line is Army Gear, released by Galoob in 1988. Now, in the late 80s, there was a trend of miniature toy lines. I don't know if this was a trend kicked off by Micro Machines and their popularity, but yeah, it was a trend, and you kind of got some really neat offerings like Army Gear. Now, what Army Gear were very small items that would transform into either vehicles or playsets for very tiny army men. You had everything from compasses, binoculars, even a pistol that would transform into little miniature play sets. You even had different medallions or, rank insignias that would turn into little tanks and jeeps and vehicles. All in all, there were 13 items released, and they also released a big pack of little army men to go with these sets. And believe me, with the size of how small they were, I'm sure you needed a lot of extra ones because they would either be sucked up in the vacuum, eaten by a dog, lost out in your yard, lost in your carpet. I mean, that's how small they were. Now, I remember the commercials for these, and let's see if we can find one.
Calling all boys for Army gear. Weapons check. Your pistol private looks real tough.
There's a missile strike for troops and stuff.
Here's a grenade, sure goes far.
There's a tower of troops and a military car. Army gear.
What's that compass that I see?
The flying satellite for troops and artillery. An army, all right here. We're the volunteers for Army gear.
Join the Army gear. The Army in an Army. Open to reveal 2 worlds of battle action. From Galoob.
Calling all boys for Army gear. Weapons check. Your machete has a hidden power.
There's a troop of 6 and a lookout tower.
That canteen so much more I hear.
There are planes and torpedoes in this Army gear. Take a look at this watch I wear. Weapons and troops are gathered there. An army in an army, all right here.
We're the volunteers for Army gear.
Join the Army gear. The Army in an Army. Open to reveal 2 worlds of battle action. From Galoob.
In '88, I was, 12 years old, and I still wanted some of these. I mean, because they just seemed like a new, fun, and interesting use of toy technology to, produce these usable binoculars. You would get a compass, a gun, a grenade, what have you, and be able to run around your backyard playing with those items while also going inside and cracking them open and having a whole different universe of playtime excitement. So, yeah, Army gear, I think, gets 2 thumbs up, and I really am excited to see where it is nowadays when we hit up eBay and hunt for these plastic ghosts. So anyway, this was a G.I. Joe July special edition of Plastic Ghosts, where we talked about military toys again. This is the second time that we've talked about military toys, and I know I say this an awful lot, but there's plenty more for future installments. So if I missed something on this list, I'm sure it'll pop up in the future. So just be patient. Now, like I said, most of the military toys that were released in the 80s, at least from 82 forward, were heavily inspired by G.I. Joe. Now, some of the ones on this list, of course, were inspired more by pop culture things like the Rambo movies, but if G.I. Joe hadn't paved the way for military action figures to be made and be popular, they probably wouldn't have taken a chance on some of these. So, all in all, G.I. Joe is a large umbrella of inspiration for all of these smaller toy companies. Now, surprisingly, only one of the items on this list were actually 3 3/4 scale, and that was Hero 1 from the Action Hero toy line, released by Woolsworth, which I still get a kick out of that, yeah, I loved Woolsworth growing up, so whenever I get a chance to talk about it, I'm super excited. So, we're going to end it there, and just remember that in a few days we will be taking this hunt online for these plastic ghosts to eBay and seeing what kind of footprint they have left in the toy universe. I'm thinking a lot of these probably don't have any lasting, effect on our toy landscape, but there's a few that probably have, endured, and I'm really excited to see just where they rank in, as far as price goes. Because, as I've said 100 times, and I'll say it 100 more times, a lot of these online retailers just see that something was made in the 80s and they hike the price up to astronomical amounts. I mean, yeah, unless you are a die-hard, Akamis collector, you probably will not be paying the prices that some of these people are charging. But I don't know. Maybe I will be surprised. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them, and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here, you enjoyed this, or any of the episodes that YouTube is recommending down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you will be notified whenever there's a new episode. So anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad, and stay dorky!